Welcome to Beans and Breakdowns, a podcast dedicated to bridging the gap between specialty coffee and the heavy music community. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Chris Hammell, also known as Hambone. Chris is the co-owner of Major Treat Coffee in the Toronto area. So grab a fresh cup of coffee and wake the fuck up! What's going on, Caffeinated Crew? I'm joined today by Chris Hammell, also known as Hambone, to a lot of people in the hardcore community. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Just so that people have some context, you are the owner and operator of Town Barber in Toronto with 2 locations, as well as co-owner of Major Treat.
Correct. Very correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about some coffee first and foremost. What are you drinking on your side?
I got the bag right here. Detour out of Dundas, Ontario, which is like a suburb of Hamilton. This is their latest Honduras. It's awesome. It's real fruity. It's good. It's really good. I literally just like ran back in the house and needed a coffee, so I just threw it in the old AeroPress and blasted it out. It's good.
Nice. I like Detour a lot. We had a few shops that will feature it every once in a while, but every time I've had it, really, really solid. It's
our number one at Major Treat right now. I mean, we're kind of gonna be phasing into like we've gone in and out of other brands over the course of our existence, but I think that we're gonna like bring a bunch of other stuff in. We got some exciting stuff coming up this year, so I think that'll kind of like play its hand into that too. You know?
That's great. I know you guys also have used Nile in the past as well.
Yeah, we do. We also carry Nile. They do our drip, and we sell their stuff currently as well. We've had Sam James. When we came back from the pandemic, he wanted to just go with shops that were exclusively selling his stuff. Mm-hmm. I've known Sam for years. He's the fucking best dude, and he's like, absolute legend. And anybody, if the word Toronto and coffee are in a sentence, his name's in there somewhere too. So it's right. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then we've had, I believe they were they've changed their name a bunch. They were Pig Iron, and they were Landscape. But they did a blend for us, just specifically for us for a while. And we switched them out to Detour as one of our manager, Becky, has a history with Detour. She's awesome. She's very knowledgeable, and she actually started her journey in coffee there. Okay. And is from Dundas, so it kind of made sense. And she was like, "I'd like to take the reins on this," and it's been awesome. We actually have another barista from there as well now, Gareth, who's like, he's fucking awesome, and he's like a metal dude too, and his knowledge is extensive. So I think we'll be kind of tapping him on the shoulder for some some suggestions and ideas and stuff going forward too.
Oh yeah. I love it when we're able to bridge, roasters with shops and create really, meaningful relationships in that respect.
Right. Yeah, me too.
I'm drinking, it's from Structure Roasters here in Montreal. One of my favorite roasters. I used to live 2 blocks from their shop. So they have a roastery and a shop. But I'm drinking, it's Diego Berrocal. It's a Costa Rican, a yellow honey process. This is a new process for me. I'm familiar with honey, but I'm not sure what the yellow honey is. So I'm going to have to delve into that.
Interesting.
But the roasters over here with Structure have been doing incredible things ever since I found them a couple of years ago, with just super interesting. They're always looking for like the new kind of trend in the producing side of things. And before the pandemic, they were actively going to Central America to source and things like that. So I have a lot of respect for what those guys are doing. I'm tasting some notes. It's still kind of cooling, but definitely good. It's got cacao, like a Costa Rican, with some like blackberry kind of flavors.
Awesome. Cool, man. Mm-hmm. I think I bought I could be totally wrong in this. When we first opened Major Treat, we obviously asked him like suggestions for gear and stuff, because neither of us have ever worked in coffee. We just wanted to own a coffee shop.
Right.
And like every other asshole that gets into this thing. But I think that like Sam tapped those guys and they had a grinder for sale. I want to say I drove from Toronto to Montreal, bought the grinder and had like a, date night in Montreal, and then drove home the next day with the grinder because it would have been easier than shipping it. And I'm pretty sure I bought it from them.
So it was in like near the Old Port was where their shop was.
I'm so out of the loop with Montreal. It's been forever since I've been there. So yeah.
It could be them. There's like so many. I mean, it feels like every other week there's a new, amazing shop opening. And that's why I kind of moving to Montreal definitely piqued my interest in coffee. I'd worked in coffee before and I've always, liked it since probably the past like 7 years or so, 8 years. But moving here, it just opened up my eyes to like so many great shops and the culture and how it affects. Like I didn't really learn about producing and things until moving here. So that's
funny. Like Martin and I do a trip to LA every year, and we like basically do like 100 shots of espresso in a day, and like you feel like you're on drugs. It's the worst fucking feeling in the world, but it's super fun. And like traveling with Martin's amazing. He's he's the best dude, and he's very. He has, he gets it with food and coffee and stuff. So it was kind of a perfect partnership for that. But we were like, well, shit, we didn't go anywhere last year because of COVID.
Right.
We had just gotten back at the beginning of COVID from a trip to LA. And I was like, man, where can we go around here? I know Halifax has cool stuff going on with coffee. And I don't know why it didn't occur to me that we could just drive to Montreal and have a weekend. Yeah. Have a weekend of just like, checking it out. I mean, I think like with the restrictions and stuff, it's been a little more difficult. And obviously we're back in like a lockdown of sorts. So I think you guys are the same. So
we're in curfew until Monday. We have a curfew at 10 p.m.
Fuck. That's so weird, man. Like, yeah, they're saying we're locked down, but like my barbershops are still open. It's just weird messaging to the people because people think that we're closed because last time everything was closed, we were part of that. So trying to get the messaging out to people that like, hey, we are open. We're doing everything as safe as possible as we've been doing. We've kind of been one step ahead of the government regulations for safety protocol the whole time. So it's a little bit weird to kind of navigate in that right now.
Yeah, it's a mess over here as well. It changes every other week. So we've been having to like read and then I'll text my friends like, hey, is the shop open? Like, are we good? So you guys kind of have to feel it out. Yeah. Talking more about, Major Treat and your partnership with Martin, why the idea of marrying coffee and hardcore? I know that the Major Treat logo, I can see your mug in the video. The Major Treat, logo is the Minor Threat, basically font.
Right.
And then Major Treat is a play on Minor Threat. In case anybody listening doesn't know. And if you haven't heard Minor Threat, go listen to Minor Threat. They're like the grandfathers of modern straight edge hardcore. But definitely go and check
probably
it out.
Literally in some way, somewhere there too.
Like 100%. But why that marriage? Why was that important for you to pair, coffee and hardcore?
I mean, Martin and I were never close back in the day, but I've always kind of known of each other and so on. He sings that band Career Suicide.
Yeah.
And we've kind of been in and around the same people for decades now. And I was cutting his hair one day and I told him that I would always love to open a coffee shop. And we actually built, when we opened the first Town Barber, we built an espresso bar in the back thinking that people would be able to come. Like, I didn't really give it any thought of like, I got a free espresso machine from like my mom's friend who closed down his restaurant. And then they so we had this thing and I didn't really know what it took to get going. I thought we could just train our counter staff to pour espresso and it would be quick, It was very much not the case. So that thing sat there and collected dust in the barbershop for probably like a year until we were like, okay, let's just take the machine away and, have this thing where we can put stuff. And when we renovated the shop, we kind of took away that counter. But one day Martin and I were sitting there, I was cutting his hair and he was sitting there. I was like, I want to open a coffee shop. He's like, me too. I was like, we should do it together. Not thinking like, I look at Martin, I really look up to him. I think that he's kind of 10 levels above mine in as far as like business and life and getting your shit together goes. Like he's a real estate agent and he's, he owned Thirsty and Miserable. Also funny enough, like hardcore themed bar in Kensington Market.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, they closed and we took the sign down yesterday. I went and helped them take that down. Man. So, I mean, I think like other factors played into that, but he's been out of that business for a while. But we were talking, and I was like, do you have a minute right now? And he's like, yeah. And I was living on Queen Street where the other shop is. And we went for a walk, and we were kind of talking about like our different ideas for what we thought a coffee shop would or should look like or whatever. And I walked him down to Queen Street, and we looked at the space, and it was called Balloon Corporate Events. And it was like, they made like balloon sculptures of whatever for like Bank of Montreal, or, you know what I mean? And so I was like, man, I live upstairs here, and I want to turn this main floor into a barbershop with a coffee shop, like barbershop in the back, coffee shop in the front. And he's like, let's do it. And I was like, it's not for lease. He's like, okay, when it is. And I ended up moving out of that space due to some strain with one of the other tenants in the building. And so we moved out, and the landlord called me a few months later as we were looking for spaces, because Martin and I were like, okay, well, fuck it. Like, I'm going to do another barbershop. We're ready to expand. If we can do coffee, cool. If not, we'll just do a standalone spot. And so we left a meeting with a landlord on the east side, and we were like, okay, this will be a cool spot for our second location. And my landlord from the west side called me from Queen Street, and she was like, hey, do you still want to rent the space? And I was like, yeah, but like, there's no way I can afford Queen Street West rent. And she's like, well, the person that just offered me this much money is like a big corporation that wants to take from the community. Your business builds community, and I respect that about you. And I had known her for like 20 years. I lived on the block before with some friends. And we used to actually hang out on her stoop because she had a better stoop than us. So she's like, I'll rent it to you for half of what they offered me. Wow. It's still a lot, but it's Queen Street. So it's insane rent. And there's no way we could have done it without that pricing. And, so I called Martin. I was like, meet me at the spot. We're going to go look through it. And so we went through, and it was like a total shithole. Like, we polished a turd making that thing look nice, but it needed a lot of work. And, we signed the lease right then. We built it out in like, I think about a month. And Martin and I just sat down, and I was like, listen, I've had this branding done. I tapped the shoulder of this graphic designer that I knew with this idea, and I wanted to do something with Major Treat. And the only thing I don't like about it is it's a little weird to say sometimes. And people, I kind of do like that everybody calls it either like Major Threat or Minor Treat, or what. They always kind of fuck it up. And I kind of like that about it, because it gives you an opportunity to correct them and then say it again. You know what I mean? So, So when I showed him, he's like, I want to do this branding. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm thinking. And he's like, oh, I like that. Let's just go with that. And I think that because we both kind of came from that world, like, I'm straight edge, but he's not, but you know, obviously don't need to be straight edge to listen to Minor Threat. And it's kind of like the staple for all of it. So it just made sense. And then like we made a bunch of horrible jokes about like, okay, so if we start roasting, we'll call a company Bad Beans, or like just another take on like a hardcore.
God damn it.
I wanted to do an ice cream shop and play the like, you know, Henry Rollins, Ian MacKay ice cream thing. And, you know, we've had a million stupid ideas that we just keep like firing back and forth, but Major Treat stuck. I was a little worried about the logo, like getting in trouble for the logo. So I reached out to Ian, and he, like, shocker, he didn't respond. I mean, I didn't expect him to. I think that font you can buy now, so I don't think it's that much of a concern. But maybe he sent me a snail mail response to my email. I'm not sure. I feel like that's more his style, but I never heard back. So I just kind of said whatever. We knew somebody that did an interview with them, and they brought him one of these mugs. And I think he kind of laughed and put it in a pile of other shit that he didn't care about. So I think, like, you know, it's not really, you know, I've heard of other members of the band coming through town and people bringing them in or telling them or whatever, and they kind of smirk. And I mean, at this point, it's all been played forever, and, you know, that band was older than I am, so it makes sense, you know?
Yeah, definitely. That's really what caught my attention the first time I saw, like, on Instagram or something, the logo. I was like, I've got to go here. Like, I got to go check this out. Going back to, you know, the landlord offered you a much better deal on the lease for the spot, because your idea for the business is to help the community and give to the community. I think, like, a big part, especially in coffee and in hardcore, is we see people from all walks of life coming into more of like a hub. So, you know, in coffee, people from, you know, business people, artists, students, everybody comes in to get coffee. It unites people and you kind of cross paths. Right. I think the same goes for hardcore, is making an inclusive, you know, environment for everyone to feel welcome in some sort of sense.
For sure.
So I'm super happy that, you know, that was able to work out, because I really think that, you know, those two things, which is why I started the podcast, is I think there's so much related in those two worlds where it's for the community first. And so as long as you have, you know, quality coffee and, you know, you're really at the center of it, are for the community, then it's gonna, you know, have some effect, some ripple, you know what I mean?
Totally. And I think, I mean, like a coffee shop and a barber shop are both two businesses that do really encourage community and build community. And we want everyone to feel welcome. And I think, like, you know, there isn't too much coffee on that block because rent is so expensive. And so splitting the rent with the barbershop makes sense. And there isn't too many barbershops in that block for the same reason. So it kind of made sense for, you know, sharing the space and bringing people in and together and so on. But I'm also a firm believer in the idea of community over competition. And I think that, like, you know, if you do put a bunch of things together, like-minded businesses, like-minded, even similar businesses, I think they can thrive in an area. Like I moved out to the suburbs recently, but the only two things I said I wanted in a home were a garage and good coffee walking distance. And I'm like full blown suburban bullshit out here, but I'm like got the garage, but there's no good coffee in Durham region when I moved here 1 year ago today. So I started going out to, there's a tattoo shop in Bowmanville, which is the next town over. And I saw on the owner's Instagram page that there was a coffee shop that just opened. So I went out and I tried it. And the owner's from San Luis Obispo in California. And like, she's super sweet. Like that, like they get it. And their coffee is phenomenal. And so going out there, I was like, oh, it's funny, because he was trying to get me to open up Major Street out there. He's like, go right across the street. It'll be perfect. And I mean, if the pandemic hadn't, you know, depleted my funds so much, I probably would have jumped on something like that a lot sooner. But when I told her, I was like, I wanted to open up out here, and I'm so glad you did. And she's like, no, do it. Like, go next door. Like, we need like more businesses like us. And I love that people actually think like that, as opposed to like, oh, you're going to take away all my business. Like, no, man, it brings more coffee people to the area. You know, just as like, if there's two shows down the road from each other, you know, bands will go back and forth. It's important for everybody. If it's just one leader in the thing. And I mean, that also waters itself down at some point. I mean, like when we opened the first Town Barber, there were no barbershops really in that hood. Like immediately, maybe it was one or two, but like now there's a million shops on the west end of Toronto, and all it really did was take away our walk-in traffic. So these guys opened a shop down the block. They're from Vancouver, kind of a corporate outfit. Yeah. And anybody walking up Ossington that was going to come in for a walk-in probably goes in there. And, you know, there's a place for all of it. But like, I do think that people don't realize that like there are other spots. And if you water something down too much, it's gonna, you know, there's a kind of a fine line between like what makes sense and what will actually take away from stuff, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of that comes from, like, I know you growing up in hardcore, I've spent a lot of time in the like local music scenes and then getting into hardcore from there, but like a DIY community, like an extremely, you believe in people, even if it's not your favorite, you know, style of music, it's not your favorite style of design work or anything like that. You push and support so that they are able to, like, you know, branch out, achieve, you know what I mean?
Totally. So, and you can pull influence from stuff like that too, right? Like it might not be your favorite. You might not like that music or whatever, but maybe you like the design aesthetic and you can pull from that, because I think that's where, you know, this globalization of everything with the internet and Instagram and all this stuff has kind of pushed influence. And I think it's really cool that, like, man, how else would you have a podcast where you're talking about coffee and hardcore? There are a lot of people that like both of those things, but the intersection, like meeting, you know, in the realm of a podcast is a really cool idea, because all podcasts for the most part are just nerdy conversations about a topic, but being able to kind of pull different things like that. It's a really cool idea for sure.
Yeah. And that's really what I want. Like, I was, bored in the pandemic. I'm like, what do I like? I like coffee. What else do I like? Yep. I like, metal and hardcore music. Like, why don't we just talk about that? I'm sure there's other people like me.
Right. For sure. Enough, and maybe even if you just get the coffee guys and maybe it turns them onto a band, or maybe if you get the hardcore guys and they're like, well, I don't know. I like coffee, but I'm stuck drinking Starbucks. It's like everything needs a gateway. And I think that people kind of shit on a lot of these things. Like, your band gets too big and people freak out. You're going to the wrong coffee shop. It's like, well, stop punishing people for like help educate people and show them the positive side of things so it doesn't discourage them from getting into it. You know what I mean? Like, because we've all had that too. I've been like, well, I'm not cool enough to fucking be into this shit. And I used to work at another barbershop that people were like, I'm not cool enough to go to get my haircut there. I'm like, you fucking kidding? It's a barbershop, dude. Right. Like, there's no cool guy bullshit. There shouldn't be, like, in any of that stuff, So I think that, being a gateway and being like an avenue into that for people is super important. Everybody needs to get into something somehow. Yeah. Nobody's born. I mean, some people are born into it, like, for sure, like your parents were in a band or whatever it is.
Yeah,
but like,
yeah. You're just around it.
Yeah, exactly. So everybody's got to find their way,
And that's exactly being a gateway is like my number one goal from the podcast. If one person listens to it and realizes like, I can learn about coffee or I can get into hardcore, that's like the main goal, is being a gateway and not a gatekeeper. I hate elitism so much.
I love that. Yeah.
Because elitism for a while turned me away from the scene in a sense. From where I was, it was just really toxic and cliquey. Yep. And so I know that it's so easy that if we don't encourage people and support people who are learning and finding their way, and just tell them, oh, you've never listened to fucking Bane? Like, how can you call yourself a hardcore kid? It's like,
totally.
Bro, Bane is not the end all be all for fucking hardcore. No. Like, there's a million bands. And if you don't like one of those bands, that doesn't make you like, are you insane? So I always want to encourage people, I don't just listen to hardcore music.
No. See, and this is the thing, like we've all done the, like, I really like what you just said about being, a gateway instead of a gatekeeper. We've all had that thing where we've been like, shit on something for whatever. And man, like, dude, some of the bands that I've toured with, I used to catch so much heat for it. And I was like, oh yeah, cool. Well, I'm getting fucking paid really good money to travel the world while you're working your shitty retail job or fucking whatever, So I think that like people opening up your, like you said, I rarely listen to hardcore these days. I mean, I do, I'll check out new bands and I'll put it on and stuff if I'm working out or whatever. But like when I'm at my house, I'm fucking listening to Miles Davis or something, like it's not like it's very rare that I want someone, and at my shop too, like this gets into a whole other conversation, but like we, I had a thing when we started out about shop appropriate music does not mean bad words. Shop appropriate music means meeting the vibe of the shop.
Right.
And so, I listen to a lot of Sade. She's my favorite, but like, I don't want to put people to sleep at the shop often, and I don't want anybody humping in the back room. So it's like, if you want to relax and have that, but there's times when we put on Rancid or fucking it kind of has to go with the flow. If somebody's grandpa's in there, we'll put on something a little more chill just to kind of suit that,
Yeah.
And this came up yesterday because we do have a new Major Treat project coming up with a record shop with there's a Toronto kind of legend that, well, I guess we'll call him Toronto. I grew up with him in Kitchener. He was the first straight edge dude I met other than myself. And he brought, the first thing we did was go to a record store together. So this is really important for me because it's kind of full circle.
Right.
And we had a big talk about music and vibe in there, when we met yesterday. And I was like, dude, like he was a little worried that he couldn't listen to fucking Ass Suck while he's, while he's like in his shop, in his space. And I was like, that's cool, but you're also not going to be there at 7 a.m. when we open the coffee shop. I don't want some mom pushing a stroller, walking in and hearing power violence when, but at the same time, a coffee interaction is much shorter than somebody hanging out in the barbershop.
Right.
So when we do split he's like, I've been in Major Treat, I've been getting my haircut in the Queen Street shop, and it's like, I've heard whatever. I'm sure it was like something super chill or whatever, because that shop vibe is very mellow. We don't listen to a lot of hard. We don't listen to really any hardcore in there at all.
Right.
maybe a little punk and stuff kind of on the cusp and stuff, but like, it's important to set the vibe for where you're at. And man, maybe that's a gateway to something else, because, you know, I think like hearing people like closing off to something and me being like, well, I love this, so I don't care what you like, but maybe you like this now because you were exposed to it in an environment that you thought was cool.
Right.
And you wanted to hear something that, you know, these other guys that you might look up to or whatever are into. And it's a, like you said, it's a cool gateway for sure.
100%. Yeah. That's how I found hardcore to begin with, is I had friends that I trusted that listened to hardcore. I would love to know, what was your introduction to hardcore being in the Toronto area?
So I grew up in Kitchener, which is an hour shittier than Toronto. And I mean, it's come up a lot now. I shouldn't talk shit on it now. It's a very different place from when I grew up there. But I think as a lot of people, I got into punk and hardcore through skateboarding. And skateboarding for me wasn't like athleticism. It was like a gateway to trouble and culture and all the things that I still love now. And, you know, I might not know who the hot shit skater is right now, but I think that like at its core, the culture of skateboarding still very much exists for me, and a lot of the values that I've gotten kind of came from that as well. But I started into that, and, you know, skate videos, started looking, you know, hearing stuff in there. And then I was up at the place that my parents live now is cottage country that my grandfather bought in the 50s. And my cousin played in a bunch of punk, metal, and hardcore bands from on the west coast of Canada. So I went up there one summer and he gave me a couple tapes, and I know Minor Threat was on it. There was Rancid on the B side. There was some NoFX, and that was my first, like, I put it on and I was like, holy shit, like this is me. And like, I had experimented with, I think I got drunk twice at like 13 and 14, smoked weed twice, same kind of deal. But once I heard Minor Threat and I kind of understood what that was, I was like, this is me. Like, this is what I'm identifying with, because I can actually be that guy. And like, I'm still doing dumb shit for sure, but like I wanted to be in and around that. And so I started to kind of like branch out and find shows. And you look at, like, for us back then, obviously, I'm sure every old guy on this podcast has said the same thing, but you look at like thank you lists of bands in their CDs and stuff like that, and their lyric sheets and stuff like that, and shout outs. And I think that was so important to me. So it's funny that we just brought up this dude, that the record store guy. I was walking from my mom's work to my dad's work to bring him some money to pay a bill or something like that. And I was wearing a Youth of Today shirt that I got at like the local record store. It was called Orange Monkey. And it's still around. It's been there since like 93 or 94. And I'm walking downtown Kitchener, and this older dude runs up to me, and he might as well have been 40. I think he's probably only like 5 years older than me, but he grabbed me by the shoulders and said, "Who the fuck are you? Like, are you straight edge? Do you know any of these bands?" And I was like, "Oh," I didn't know what to do. And I was like, I'm just trying to go record shopping. And he's like, "I'm going to take you and I'm going to show you what to buy." And I was like, this is fucking awesome. So he asked me on the way there, like, what do you like? If you like Youth of Today, do you know Gorilla Biscuits? Do you know like all these other bands? And so I ended up spending the money that I was supposed to bring my dad on a stack of records. And I showed up at my dad's office and I was like, palms sweating, like, what the fuck am I going to do? Like, I spent his money. And my dad was so stoked that I did this, because he values music so much, that on our way home, he's like, "Don't tell your mom, but this is, I've got a little bit of cash. I was going to take you to Encore right now and buy a record. And we could, is there anything else you didn't get?" And there was one of those like bootleg Cro-Mags CDs. That's like, it was like Age of Quarrel, Best Wishes, Split, whatever. And I was like, "Yeah, this one." He's like, "Throw it on the pile." And we went home and I like showed him what I got. He's like, "This is a little aggressive for me, but like, I play Rancid and stuff." And he heard like, "This sounds like fucking Chuck Berry." Like this sound, like hearing things that were cool for us to like vibe on. He knew the Clash, and he knew, like these things. Music was so important in my house that it was like encouraged. And I think like, any band that I played in, my dad would come and my dad's seen like Earth Crisis, Hatebreed, Sick of It All, like all these bands that we were playing with growing up. it was a cool gateway. And where my mom thought that straight edge was something that kids told their parents so they could go out and do drugs, my dad was like listening to the message at the shows. He's like, no, this is a real thing. Like, this is what these kids that, like, you know, I'm not getting into trouble because I'm on drugs. I'm getting into trouble because I'm a fucking idiot. Like, it's, you know, that's where this goes, you know? So yeah, it was, I guess I would say my cousin, and then Dave played a big role. And like, I was already in it, but like pushing me in that direction and kind of like finding that was super cool, you know?
I'm so happy for parents like that. Like, having parents that will like at least take the time to try to understand. Yeah. Because I feel like there's so many families that, you know, they're just like, oh, kids, like they'll be into what they're into. But like hearing a message and seeing that it's like part of something bigger. It's not just, you know, being mad to be mad. Totally.
And I think like angst is obviously a big part of being a teenager and identifying with some part of that, whether you're listening to like, and I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I was not exclusively listening to punk and hardcore in my teens either. I love rap music. I've always loved a lot of rap music. So like 90s rap was a big part of throwing me too. And I think that like hearing the values and the similarities and the, you know, like seeing the Onyx Slam video. And I remember like watching that video and being like, holy fuck, like what is this? And the Biohazard guys, and knowing that like, man, Toby from H2O and Isaac are in that video. And so Toby told me, I was staying at Toby's house like 15 years ago. And we were talking about like formative stuff. And I was like, man, Onyx was like the gateway, like that like pushed me over the edge. I was like, this is, you know, my style was kind of like my clothes were, you know, very much taken from that, like seeing workwear for the first time and being like, oh, I can buy Dickies for $20 as opposed to like $200 fucking jeans that my peers are wearing. And so I identify with a lot of that stuff. And it was probably because of that record changed me, dude. I used to prank call kids in my class and put on the skits in between songs on that record. And so knowing that like Toby and those dudes were in that video, and it was a big deal for me, you know? So I think that like kind of pulling from all those things and finding angst and finding anger and working with it and channeling it as cliche as that sounds was very important, you know?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I know that you have played in a lot of bands, but a lot of your time in the scene and the industry has been as a tour manager for a lot of, you know, punk and even outside of punk and hardcore. But how did you kind of find your way from, you know, playing in bands to start managing and doing all of that?
I mean, I realized really quickly that nothing I was doing musically was sustaining any kind of living for me. So I was playing in bands that were more like hobbies, like everybody else, you know. And I got asked to go on the road with, do you know the band Goldfinger? So like ska punk band, and I did co-op with this dude in high school where he was a promoter, and I went to co-op class and they were like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to do something in music. I want to promote shows. And they were like, find a promoter. And so I went to see Hatebreed, Motorhead, Dropkick Murphys, and what was supposed to be Scarhead, but I think Scarhead robbed the Motorhead tour bus and got kicked off. And I found the promoter. I was like, I want to be that guy, you know? And so I, you know, worked for him for a little bit. He went on the road with Goldfinger, and then he came back to get married and basically like passed the job on to me. And so I was vegan, I was straight edge. And so they needed somebody to go, you know, I guess I was a stage manager, but I was kind of just like punchy 20-year-old kid that was like, you know, not taking any shit from anybody. And I think I learned a lot of valuable lessons on that tour. Like the drummer in the first week was like, I fucking hate you. You're annoying. You're getting in fist fights every day. I don't want you out here representing us. I don't want you out here with us. And I shaped up that day. I was like, I need to chill and calm down. And so from there, I like, you know, it wasn't always a tour manager position. I was kind of taking whatever role I could get with whatever band, and, you know, moved out to Los Angeles, lived with the guys in Good Charlotte for a few years and toured with them and did various jobs, and, you know, ended up coming back and playing in other bands and trying to like make it go at like a pop punk band that we were in. And then a fucking another couple hardcore bands that were just like stuff to do, but I never expected anything to ever become, you know, my means of like making a living, you know? So I think like recognizing that it was a really cool way to see the world and to, you know, make friends and kind of sort of put off growing up as long as I could, you know, like be the real Peter Pan. And obviously some bands paid a lot more than others. Like I would tour for free if I did a good tour that was like, you know, paid me well and I was able to kind of make my rent and do whatever. And then my best friend Dan's band would be like, hey, can you come out and tour with us? I was like, if you can get my flight, I'll just do the tour for you. Take a few months and whatever. So it worked out really well in a lot of those cases that I could lend a hand and just be there for whoever kind of needed it, you know?
Yeah. That's awesome. I've always wondered how people but it always seems to be, you just know somebody and then that position.
It's pretty organic. Yeah. And like I'll often, like, I mean, guys that I know that are still on the road, mostly have worked up. It's funny how many hardcore dudes are now like, you know, starting in a hardcore band or starting a hardcore, you know, camp, like touring with a band and then moving up to like something a little bigger. Mm-hmm. And now all those guys seem to be out with EDM DJs and stuff because it's like, it's a lot easier when you got one guy to worry about, not 15, mm-hmm. and you're flying around in private jets and shit, like doing weekends in Vegas is like the extent of your travel. It seems a lot easier than how we were roughing it in vans and doing dumb shit, you know?
Yeah, it's I've seen a lot of front of house guys. They'll start out with like, you know, some insane, you know, metal or hardcore band. And now they're mixing, like you said, like they're mixing like major pop, like 21 Pilots or some, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely, I guess for a lot of people, that's the goal. But I love that, like the organic transition and then being able to see, you know, the world with a lot of these, I mean, at like cool bands, even today, like I remember listening to Good Charlotte when I was in, this is going to sound stupid, I was like in 5th grade the first time I heard Good Charlotte.
But again, like back to the gateway thing, dude, like that's important. Like that's, mm-hmm. You know, for me, I would say in those cases, it was like Rage Against the Machine and Beastie Boys. Like that was my formative stuff because, you know, and then getting in, like by the time Green Day and Rancid and stuff came along, I was already kind of in and around that world and stuff. So for me, it was like, you know, somebody put something on like, oh, you like this? Do you like Our Lady? You wouldn't have heard of Our Lady Peace.
Yeah,
huh?
I do. I
okay. So I was going to say that they're like Canadian shit, but like, you know, just because it has a guitar doesn't mean I'm going to like it. And just because it's not like, you know, people kind of like explaining that to people, like what you're into. I remember my mom's friend got me for Christmas, got me a Prodigy calendar because they're like, this guy's got wacky hair. Like he's going to like it. It was like, I get where you're coming from because what this looks like to somebody from the outside is like, that was what you thought of. But again, it's you know, it isn't all image and it isn't all sound, you know? So funny that you were in grade 5. I was like probably out with them at that time, you know?
Yeah, no, that's no joke. It was like 2000. Oh man, 2000, around 2005, 2006. Not maybe not that. No, it would have been that late. It was like 2003.
Wild.
But yeah, it's weird to
Pretty
think.
Funny.
You're touring with Good Charlotte. I'm hearing them on SNL for like the first time. So
as an actual child,
as a real living, breathing child.
Yeah.
Cause my friends and I was trying to start bands as early as 5th grade. And the only friend I had that played anything, he played bass. And the first song he wanted to do was play the anthem by Good Charlotte.
Amazing.
That's one of the first like punk rock, you know,
songs
I learned on drums.
Right. But I mean, again, like it's so important hearing that because you know, I've listened to a lot of podcasts with like usually nerdy music shit. And it's like hearing that, like, you know, somebody's gateway, like Todd Jones's gateway was Strife, is so fucking important to music. Because think about all the cool shit that guy's done as a result. And man, I remember seeing that Strife video for the first time and being like, oh my God, I was in high school. I fucking skipped school to buy, you know, Satisfaction is a Devil's Desire. And I was like, brought the tape record back to my class, listened on my Discman, and was like mind blown. and I'm like watching, I played in the band at the time with, you know, the Cancerback.
Yeah.
So Liam, the singer, is like my oldest friend. And he's a couple years older than me. And I met him when I was like 13 or 14. And he was in like this ska punk band. And I was their very loose quotations manager. I was basically just like trying to book them shows and stuff, but really I was just trying to turn them into a hardcore band. So we kind of shifted things around, and we had 2 singers. It was really just a shitty rap metal band. But
that's great.
But like Liam and I, you know, like being in that together was like it was super important. And man, like understanding that was like part of our gateway. And a kid came up to me afterwards and was like, man, you sound just like the singer from Stripe. And I don't think anybody has ever complimented me like that in my life. I was just like, that's the coolest thing anybody's done. That's exactly what I want. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That was what I was going for. Fuck, I was I was shaving my head back then before I, involuntarily lost my hair. Yeah. So it was like that. That was what I was going for, because that's what we emulated. I was in a small town in Ontario. I wasn't going out to California. I'd see like One Truth Video, like the DVD or VHS that they put out about the tour and stuff. And I was just like, this is what I want to do, but how do I get there? Like it wasn't as accessible as Instagram or even a message board or anything, So
yeah, definitely. I super appreciate you coming on today and talking with me. This conversation has really, really been like, I was looking forward to it a lot leading up, and it's just been an awesome time talking with you. I just have one question for you.
Yeah.
What is your favorite city for Beans and Breakdowns?
Obviously, like New York hardcore has a special place in my heart, because I really felt when I was discovering a lot of stuff that I was born in the wrong generation and the wrong fucking area code. But I've loved going to Los Angeles, and I've been going to shows there forever, and I love a lot of the coffee shops down there. I actually found a new favorite spot down in Orange County in Fullerton. Mm-hmm. It's called Play Coffee. That's probably my the last trip that I went to. It's brand new and it's fucking awesome. They just seem to be doing everything right. Mm-hmm. I would probably say at this point Los Angeles, just because of that. But at the same time, like I can't sleep on Toronto, man. Like there's so much cool shit going on with music and bands that come through and young bands coming up, and like I'm probably done playing music at this point. Like, but I think that like being in and around that stuff and seeing what's happening in coffee and like new shops, like my favorite. I don't just drink coffee at Major Tree. I still, on my way to work, I'll stop in at 135 Ossington and see those guys. They're like fucking amazing coffee shop, and right next door to them is Sam James, and sometimes I literally will go to both of them at the same time. Like it's that important. Sam's got shops all around the city, and there's really cool stuff kind of coming up everywhere. So I think that you're also kind of starting to see, like like anything else, you're starting to see shit pop up in small towns. Like Whitby is the next town over the other way, so Bowmanville is this way with that shop that I was telling you about, and Whitby's just got one now too. And so I'm like, okay, I am sandwiched in between. There's nothing I live in Oshawa, but there's nothing here just yet. And I think it will come. And I think that these small towns will start to branch out, like having grown up in Kitchener, there's a couple shops popping up there. It's important. There were coffee shops that we loved going to growing up, but nothing like what's kind of happening in coffee now as we're all kind of seeing,
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on. I wish all the best for I know the pandemic is really unpredictable, and hopefully we'll come out on the other side of this, this little spike.
I think so, man.
Better than last time. But I wish you, the Town Barber and the Major Tree team, all the best.
Appreciate you, man. Yeah, well, I'll look you up if I'm heading to Montreal. We'll grab a coffee.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, enjoy the rest of your Saturday, Chris.
Likewise.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beans and Breakdowns. I want to say a huge thanks to Chris for coming on the podcast. I had such a great time getting to chat with him and learn all about what he's got going on in the Toronto area. If you are in the Toronto area, be sure to hit up Major Treat Coffee. You can find them on Instagram at Major Treat Coffee. And if you need a fresh cut, be sure to check out one of Town Barber's locations. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. If you would like to learn more about what we've got going on at Beans and Breakdowns, you can follow us on Instagram at Beans and Breakdowns, or find us on the web at beansandbreakdowns.com. Until next week, stay caffeinated and wake the fuck up!